Welcome back, you lovely people. This will be Dust in the Wind, Part 3, Trial in the Woods. As per usual, links to the original down below. I mentioned before how peaceful it is to get a bird's eye view. How it's a thing only a few wastelanders will ever have the fortune of seeing. How tiny and peaceful everything seemed. Even then, as I continue to fly upwards into the wild blue yonder, I still believe that to be true. Even as I hit my parabolic arc and began my descent, I still believed that it was beautiful. I wished it wasn't overshadowed by the crippling fear I was feeling. I was already beginning to lose sight of the others would-be hunters. Some were crashing into the forest with all the grace of a drunken gecko. Others floated through the air like feathers. Every one of them was prepared for what they needed to do, having had time to prepare. I needed to improvise. Fast. Okay, Six. Calm down. Ground's getting close. Gotta think. My mind ran through as many ideas as it could, cobbling together any ideas that could potentially slow my descent. Part of me briefly entertained the idea of using explosions to slow myself down. Of course, that was assuming I'd brought something more effective than a bunch of grenades. Plus, this wasn't a cartoon. I'd killed myself trying that. I knew a lot of other shit, though. Some of it was actually useful at one point or another. I knew that spreading out force across a large area lessens the impact. It's why a shield or armor works like they do. But that was only going to do so much. I needed to slow down. If I could hit the leaves of a taller tree, it'd help. But would it be enough? Even if it did, I was still going to hurt worse than that time Lily dragged me into a red scorpion's nest. Wait, drag, that's it! Moving like a man who was hurtling to the ground and didn't want to die, I slid my legs into a set of loops that were stitched into the lower part of the riot armor's duster. They were there to help it be form-fitting. Just needed to hope they were up to the task. With my legs ready, and the ground creeping up fast, I gripped either side of my duster and spread my coat taut. The effect was almost immediate. The wind caught my expanded coat like a sail and slowed me down. That didn't change the fact that landing was still going to suck. I stayed airborne for another 5 seconds, struggling to angle myself towards the highest tree I could with my rapidly declining height. I dive bombed straight into a sea of green. The leaves were the first thing to try and cushion my fall. Then I crashed through those and against a dozen of branches before blowing out the other side. I came out spinning, unable to control my fall anymore. I was crashing hard. The world was a blurred kaleidoscope of greens and browns. Then I hit something just first. It was cold and wet for the moment I was on it. Then I bounced, hit it again, bounced, and then crashed down, skidding to a halt in the dirt. It took me until after the world stopped spinning to realize I just skipped myself across a small pool of water. Of course, that wasn't immediate. Ow! I wheezed painfully. The world spun. My body felt like it just went 10 rounds in the ring with Veronica, and I was considering walking into this bright light that was slowly creeping up in front of me. Then I realized I was just staring at the reflection of the sunlight on the water. I wasn't entirely cognizant, but I got the feeling that the last thing I needed at this moment was to add drowning to my current list of ailments. I'd come to rest under the shade of a tree, sunlight trickling through the gaps between the various tree branches. I laid on the ground, hoping some of the pain would subside. At this moment, I think I was starting to understand what the term adamantium skeleton meant. Nothing felt broken, but I was going to need a stim pack or some medics. Unfortunately, Ozpin had confiscated everything that remotely looked like a drug. Fucking narc. Guess I was going to have to settle for bronze. As soon as my bones didn't feel like shattered glass, I dragged myself out from under the tree and into direct sunlight. Not sure when it happened, but at some point in the past, I noticed that spending time under the sun had a number of impacts on me, such as making me not feel like I was sitting at death's door. Not sure when it happened. Furthest back I can remember, it was after my time in Vault 22. Perhaps I should check with Keeley when I get back. Unfortunately, it wasn't that powerful. If I had a day to spend just lounging in the sun, I'd probably be fit as a fiddle in no time. But I didn't. I had to keep moving if I didn't want whatever obstacles Osmond had mentioned making a snack out of me. I'd get better with time, though, so I guess it pays to be solar powered. Woohoo! I hear a voice whooping overhead. It was promptly followed by several bouts of gunfire, and I see a yellow blur pass overhead, bringing off the trees and descending into the forest ahead. In the distance, I could hear a soft, "Nailed it!" Show off. I was following the spirit of Osmond's whole partnership guideline. I'd have to peel myself from the ground and chase her down. But I wasn't observing the spirit. I was looking at the word. There'd been no eye contact. I wasn't getting a partner. Screw Osmond if he says otherwise. Screw him and his fucking secretary. That, I shouted, trying to bite back the pain that was coursing through my body. I swear, when I get my hands on her, Ow! I proceed to break down into a series of unintelligible noises. Being completely honest, I was only half as mad as it seemed. Most of it was me trying to vocalize my pain. I went on like that for a few seconds. Then my throat started to hurt, too, so I put a stop to that. I took several deep breaths and tried to focus, pushing the pain out of my mind and getting my ducks in a row. Okay, I can worry about revenge later. Right now I need to move. Let's see if I can stand. Despite pain still rippling through my body, I managed to roll to the side and push myself up, limbs feeling like jelly with sticks in them. By that judgment, I would estimate that about 15% not good. Not particularly good in any way, but I was getting better with each second in the sun. I trudged away from my landing spot. All things considered, once the pain mostly subsided, I was doing pretty well. I hadn't seen anyone since my landing. I also hadn't seen any trouble yet. As far as I was concerned, things couldn't be better. I could hear gunfire and the sounds of a struggle echoing from somewhere in the forest, but nowhere actually close enough to draw my immediate attention. I'd been following the compass of my pit boy for probably half an hour. I had no clue how far the temple was from the cliff we'd been launched from, but I assumed I was making good time. I had to say, it seemed my luck was taking a turn. Then the forest caught fire. I walked into a clearing, caught a whiff of the smoke for all of a second. Then the forest behind me caught fire. Then the forest to both my sides caught fire. Everything was burning. I broke into a run and charged into the forest ahead of me. The heat and smoke clouded my vision, but I knew standing still was just going to get me killed. Then I leapt over a giant burning tree and met what I assumed were the obstacles. In front of me were three frenzied creatures. They appeared to be some hideous mutated dog or wolf, fur the color of tar and bony spikes covering them. Their eyes glowed beneath the bone armor that covered their heads. If there existed creatures that screamed, "I'm evil!" louder than these things, I had yet to meet it. The largest of the creatures noticed me. It stopped panicking and turned to face me, letting out a distorted and warped howl. I could feel the fire growing more intense with every passing second. I couldn't stay here, but these creatures wanted otherwise. I drew the 10mm pistol from my hip holster and got a bead on the smallest one's head. One twitch of my finger and a ball of hot lead leapt from the barrel. I could see the impact. The head of the small one pivoted backwards and stayed tilted for a bit. Then his head lurched back, down, and glared at me again. Not so much as a crack in the armor. It gave a low growl. "Oh, come on!" The 10mm was pretty weak by just about any standards. There was just so much of it that Wastelanders kept using it. I figured that it'd be at least somewhat useful. I shouldn't have been surprised this world was going to throw me another curveball. But Probably the third time now. It did, and I was. I might as well just shot the thing with a BB gun. The small wolf charged at me, its two friends keeping pace behind it. Part of me was tempted to turn on VATS and hope I could target something vital before it got me. But there were three of them. Even if I took one, I'd be left to deal with the others. That's not even account for the fact that VATS keeps me from running. So I took option B. I ran. I strafed to the left of the beast, and they curved their gait to keep in line with me. One handing the 10mm, I squeezed the trigger, slinging lead towards the lead wolves that chased me. The small ones drew close enough and pounced. I dove and rolled as it crashed past me into the fire. I was going to count it burning and quickly got back to my feet, running as fast as I could in the direction of the forest that wasn't currently burning hellhole. I fired off another 3 shots from my pistol, emptying the clip. The bullets whizzed through the air, two of themselves buried into the dirt. The third found home in the paw of the mid-sized wolf. The beast snarled loudly, clearly affected to some extent by the small wad of lead that hit it. But it wasn't enough to stop it. It was slowed, slightly, but it could still continue to chase me. I could feel myself sweating bullets in my armor and helmet. The heat of the fire was unbearable. I was running as fast as I could, but the blaze was still expanding. Whatever had caused the fire must have lit the place up worse than a flamer. My lungs burned from the heat and the running. I could hear the beasts behind me. If the fire bothered them, they weren't showing it. I grabbed one of the grenades from my belt and pulled the pin. I released the safety lever and counted, chucking it over my shoulder at the count of 2. I leapt over a fallen tree and heard a solid boom echo out from behind me. I heard one of the wolves let out a distorted yelp, and I hoped I managed to wound one of them. But I couldn't turn around and check. I needed to keep running. I reached a small clearing in the flames, an area where the trees had either never taken root or had been removed from. Wasn't sure which. I bolted across the clearing. I could just barely see the part of the forest the blaze had yet to claim. It was right behind those Yaogwai. Yaogwai! I stumbled to a halt. In front of me was a pack of 4 Yaogwai, or, rather, this world's version of them. They shared some similarities to the wolves, bone plates covering their heads, like a helmet, spikes protruding randomly from their bodies, and a black fur like tar. They saw me, immediately closed the distance. I turned. 2 of the wolves were waiting. The large one, who was missing most of its left forward paw, and the medium-sized one, its jaw slack, its rear legs trailing behind it. Guessing the grenade did half the job. I raised my pistol and pulled the trigger. The empty click of the receiver reminded me I needed to reload. The Alguayan wolves circled me, probably trying to get me to panic, make a stupid move so they could tear me down. Unfortunately, I'm not drunk. I grab another clip out of my coat and reload the pistol, rocking the slide into chamber around. One of the Yaogwai motions towards me. I turn and draw on it. I squeeze the trigger and pump around into its head. I hit the mask, but the splatter sends a shard of lead into its eyes. It reacts. It's not happy at all. The glowing in its now wounded eye dies down. Come on! I roar at them. What? Well, you afraid? Huh? Their circling begins to slow. I've got enough bullets for all ya. Come on! I wrap a finger around the wire loop of a grenade pin. I have my hunting rifle still slung to my back, but it wasn't meant for close fights like this. It'd take too long to aim. This fight was going to be short and loud. If I'm honest, I undershot this by a gross margin. I was a skilled shot even without VATS. If I'd had even half a plan coming here, I'd be fine. Instead, my dumbass walked into a forest fire filled with tough as hell mutant animals, saying I got luck like 13 pitch black cats, and the perception of a trout can't even begin to describe it. The Yaogwai charged me. I turned around and squeezed the trigger as many times as I could as they bore down on me. Hot lead tore at the charging bears. I could see the bullets sparking as they clashed against their bone armor. They lunged, and I wrapped my hand completely around the grenade. Then I took to the sky. Something came at me out of left field and pulled me out of the fire. At first, it slammed me face first into the dirt. then pulled me up with a burst of air smacking against the ground. I could see the ground quickly falling away as the thing that grabbed me took off into the sky. I scrambled to look at the thing holding me. Looking back, it appeared to be some sort of crow or raven. Only, it was the size of a bus and had a bone mask helmet, like every other mutant I'd seen. It plucked me from the forest and was currently flying low over the trees. It seemed to be preparing to rise a little higher as the distance from us and the fire grew. Yeah, this isn't happening. I aimed my pistol behind my back and struck it against the leg that was holding me. Before we got any higher, I pulled the trigger twice. The talons holding me released, and I fell back into the canopy, crashing through the leaves and bouncing off tree branches. I passed through, falling, and hit the ground with a thud. The wind gets knocked out of me, and I'm left coughing. I'm overheated, can't breathe, and I hear a ringing in my head. Part of me really just wanted to lay there. Six? A familiar voice asked through the ringing. Great, now what? I turned my head to the side and see Ruby sitting on the ground. The snowflake girl was standing behind her. She looked like she'd been pacing around. On the bright side, I wasn't getting a partner. On the dark side, I was going to be stuck with these two for the rest of the trip. I could feel it in my bones. Either that, or it's from hitting the ground again. Howdy, I grunt as I force myself up from the ground. Who's that? The snowflake asked, with just the faintest hint of snobness. He's a friend? Ruby ventured. More like a bad habit, I say, approaching them. Ugh, Snowflake growled, rolling her eyes. Perfect. Just what I needed. Well, screw you too, Snowflake. Snowflake glared at me, while Ruby looked sullen at the ground. Whatever. Snowflake grumbled, grabbing Ruby by the sleeve. Come on, Ruby. The temple's this way. She then proceeds to walk in a direction that, according to my compass, was not the right way. I mean this way, she corrected herself, now going the complete opposite direction of the temple. She then stopped again. Actually, you know what? We passed it. You got any idea where you're going, Snowflake? I asked, sliding my pistol back into its holster. Snowflake gave me another glare. Probably had the patent for it or something. I know exactly where I'm going. Uh-huh, I nod sarcastically. And my name is Weiss Schnee, she said indignantly. All right, got it. White knee. Totally going to remember that. So, where are you going then? I felt her glare ratchet up a notch as I continued to grate on her nerves. I was doing a wonderful job at it. We are going to the forest temple, she hissed angrily. Ugh, Ruby groaned from her position as deadweight. Oh, stop it. Weiss switched her attention back to the girl in black. You've got no idea where we're going either. Well, at least I'm not pretending like I know everything. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're a big, stupid jerk, and I hate you! Ruby pulled her sleeves free from Weiss's grip and motioned angrily at her. Ugh! Weiss growled angrily. Just keep moving. Oh, just keep moving. Hurry up. Watch where you're going. Why are you so bossy? I'm not bossy. Don't say things like that. Well, then stop treating me like a kid. Stop acting like a kid. Well, stop acting like you're perfect. I'm not perfect. Enough! I shout at the top of my lungs. You're both acting like a couple of children. The two stop their shouting match and look at me, Ruby looking like a kicked puppy, Weiss like a very upset and smug cat. I'm not a child, she growled. Could have fooled me since you're acting like a spoiled brat. What, Mommy and Daddy didn't buy you that pony you wanted? I hit a nerve with that. The look she gave me implied she really wanted to stab me with that weird-looking sword on her hip. How dare you? Whatever. I looked down at my compass to find my bearing. Soon, as I find it, I turned my back to the duo, and I walked off in the direction of the compass. Hey, where are you going? Weiss demanded angrily. Get back here! Take a wild guess. I'm going to the temple. Have fun, you two. Hold on, Ruby shouted. Not happening, Ruby, I say back. Your partner knows what she's doing. Let her sort it. There was a massive rush of air from behind me as a flurry of rose petals. From nowhere, Ruby appeared and was now pushing against my armor with her tiny hands. It was having no effect on me. Oh, how the hell? Please don't leave, Ruby said quickly. I don't want to be left alone with her. She's mean. I heard that, Weiss shouted. I kept walking and Ruby kept pushing, with the only result being her boots sliding backwards in the dirt as I moved. Please? She asked again. Ruby, she's your partner, I say, slowly moving her to the side. How are you going to work together if you can't come to a consensus on doing something like this? I don't know, she admitted. She stopped resisting and stepped aside, remembering how I said she looked like a kicked puppy before? Now she looked like a kicked puppy that just watched all its siblings get sold off. I continued forward, stepping through some bushes, following my compass, and ignoring the sad girl behind me. She'd be fine. She was tougher than she looked. She totally wasn't crying now. If she couldn't do this, how is she going to make it here? These two could find a way by themselves, right? Their sense of direction isn't that bad, is it? I stopped walking and looked up from my compass. Don't do it, Six. This'll be easier without company. Just get in, grab something, get out. Don't complicate it. Ugh, I sighed. Don't you dare. I turned around and started walking back. Don't. I stepped through the bushes. So, you guys want to tag along or... Ruby sprang up to me with a big smile on her face. You came back! Ah! I articulate my surprise eloquently. This girl managed to trick me using crocodile tears. Something ain't right. That's not how that works. I don't get tricked with shit like this. Come on, Weiss! Ruby shouted back to her partner. What makes you think he knows the way? Weiss asked, indignantly. The all-knowing block of steel, I said, raising my pip-boy. It's got the coordinates for the temple. You coming or not? Fine. Weiss trudged over to us, clearly not happy about the turn of events. We were making good time to the temple. The two of them were following close behind me the whole way. It was definitely quieter than my initial romp in the forest had been. So far, we hadn't been jumped by a bunch of wolves and bears. So, Six, Weiss said, clearly liking my name as much as she did myself. Yeah? I say, ducking beneath a low-hanging branch. What were you doing in that tree? Waiting for snooty rich girls to scare/poke fun at. Really? Weiss asked honestly. No, not really. Watch your head. I move aside a branch and let the two girls pass under it before following them. I was dropped into it by some bird. I continued, less sarcastically for my companions. A bird? Ruby asked. Yeah, some giant black bird with a bone mask helmet thing that grabbed me while I was in the middle of something. Bird? You mean a nevermore? Ruby asked. A what? A nevermore. You know, grim that looks like birds. Grim? You do know what grim are, right? Weiss cut in. Osmond had told me that the point of this academy was to train people to fight monsters. He never called any of them by names, though. Something he didn't have to tell me, though, was to keep my trap shut about being from another world. Things were going to be hard enough without people thinking I was a few bullets shy of a full clip. Damn shame that I didn't know jack about this world and was now starting to make an ass of myself. Oh, yeah, totally. Okay, then why did you let one grab you? Weiss continued. Well, I was pretty distracted. There was a forest fire and a bunch of wolves. Forest fire? Ruby asked, stepping over a log. Yeah, some idiot probably lit it by accident. It'll probably have a good chunk of the forest removed by the time we're done. Weiss and Ruby shared a look. Not sure why, but I wasn't in a prying mood. Anyways, I was tumbling around in it and didn't notice when the Nevermore swooped in and nabbed me. It actually helped me more than anything. I stopped and checked my Pip-Boy. We were getting close. Couldn't check the map, but I could tell we were getting there. I really needed to see if Osmond had a microfilm map of the area. How much farther? Ruby asked. Little further, probably just over the next hill. I continued forward, following the compass. So, you don't mind me asking, where's your partner, Six? Don't got one. I grumble, stepping aside a puddle. What do you mean? You should have run into at least one person before you found us. Not if you're intentionally avoiding everyone.
Osmond said you only get a partner if you make eye contact with someone. I don't want a partner, ergo, I don't let other people see me. What about us? You already get a pass for being partnered already. Well, you can't expect to make it without a partner, Weiss spoke up. Just because I'm stuck with this screw up doesn't mean I don't want a partner. You don't even know me, Ruby mumbled. Yeah, well, I've gotten this far on my own, I continued. Don't plan on getting tied down to another team. I don't think you get a choice with that either, Ruby cut back. Watch me. We passed through some shrubbery and found ourselves facing another clearing. Compared to the others I'd seen, this one was clearly artificial. People regularly took the time to make sure trees didn't spring up in this area. If I needed any more evidence, the large ruin at the opposite end was a pretty obvious indicator. Finally! Weiss groaned, pushing past me and Ruby. Weiss, wait up! Ruby said, tagging along behind her teammate. Ruby and Weiss left the safety of the shrubbery behind. It didn't take much to realize that the two didn't have a very good sense of caution. Hypocritical of me to say as it is, but I at least knew better than to rush out of cover into the open. There may not have been anyone trying to shoot us, but it doesn't mean it's safe. I waited a moment longer, just to make sure that I wasn't going to regret stepping out of cover. Okay. Seems, in the blink of an eye, a massive shadow flew over Ruby and Weiss. They realized this, turned to face it, and they were snatched from the ground by a massive Nevermore. Not safe. Definitely not safe. Having learned my lesson from the 10mm for the time being, I pulled out my hunting rifle off my back and made sure there was a round in the chamber. In the distance, I could hear the sound of shifting stone, and I could feel the earth rumbling beneath my feet. Wonderful. Back into the fray. I braced myself and stepped out of the shrubs. Then a lot of things happened at once. I heard the sounds of a 12.7mm round, followed by Ruby screaming. She was now free and falling from the sky. I bolted towards the fallen girl, but before I could reach her, something else flew out of the forest and smacked into Ruby like a rag doll mid-fall. They both disappeared into the nearby branches of another tree. Then there was a roaring from a different part of the forest, almost directly behind me. I turned and watched as a jaguar the size of a farmhouse knocked over the trees as it stumbled out of the forest on its hind legs. I pulled my rifle to my shoulder and prepared to pump around into it. Before I could, there was a pink explosion behind it and it toppled over like a house of cards. Then there was a girl with orange hair. I think I called her Motormouth before. Somersaulted on top of it and over the crumbling corpse, laughing like she was having the time of her life. She stood and turned back to look at the Yagwai. Aw, it's broken! She pouted before jumping back onto its head, staring down at it like an enamored 10-year-old. Then, Kung Fu Guy stumbled out of the woods from behind the bear, clearly winded, and tried to catch his breath. Nora! He panted between breaths. Don't ever do that again! In the blink of an eye, she was gone from the bear. Then I realized she was suddenly in front of me, trying to look at my eyes through the lens of the mask. Her eyes were pale blue, and she had a little rosy cheeks. Hi there! She shouted merrily. Remember me? Of course not. We haven't met, but I remember you. You were in the bathroom this morning when me and Ren walked in, and I thought your mask was really cool, and it made you look super mysterious. And now you're wearing that cool armor. Where'd you get it? That rifle? It looks ancient. Probably has a bunch of cool stories, and I bet you have a bunch of cool stories. What's your name? She spouted words like a runaway minigun. It seemed innocent enough, but she was quickly invading my personal space. She definitely lived up to the name Motormouth. Dear God, where's the off switch? I blinked again, and she was gone. I quickly looked around to find the ADD addled girl. I saw her at the temple a few yards away, staring at what I could assume was one of the relics. I finally noticed Yang and Blake standing there as well. Nora then snatched the relic from the pedestal and held it high in the air. She started dancing around with it. I'm queen of the castle, she shouted happily. Nora! Kung Fu Boy shouted, approaching from behind me and clearly aggravated by his companion's antics. Nora immediately stopped dancing around and started coming back towards us. Coming, Ren! Kung Fu Boy sighed and rubbed his eyes. How? How do you put up with that? I asked, trying not to come off as overly rude. Patience, he groans. A lot of patience. Buddy, there ain't enough patience in this world to. Then there was another roar from the forest, followed promptly by an explosion of trees and earth. I watched as the legionnaire I'd seen in the locker room get chased from the forest by a large red scorpion I'd ever seen. To give perspective, it made the X-42 Robo Scorpion I fought in the Big Empty look small. If I had to guess, this thing was probably poisonous too, given that its stinger was glowing. I watched the Legionnaire dip and dodge away from the creature as it made its swipes at her. Oh, that! I say, turning and running towards the temple, officially tired of standing around and waiting for shit to pop out of the forest. Kung Fu Boy followed suit. I quickly closed the distance between me and the temple. As I did, Ruby popped out of the trees and landed next to Yang. Ruby! Yang shouted, happily in surprise. Yang! She returned, going to hug her sister. Nora! Nora popped up between the two, interrupting the reunion. Watch out! I shout, barreling past a small party and into the temple. 6? Yang asked, slowly growing frustrated. Jean! I had heard the legionaries shout in the distance. Pyra! I hear a familiar voice shout from the trees. This continued on a while. I ran into the temple. In a large circle that ringed the ruins were stone pedestals. Most were bequeathed with chess pieces. Others were empty. These must have been the relics Osmond had been referring to. There were two sets of colors and doubles of each piece, save for the pedestals that were empty. Okay, so he's making us use the pieces to make teams. There's a pretty simple workaround for that. I examined all the pieces present and found a set that still had doubles, a set of black pawns. I took them both and stuffed them into my coat. No teams for me, thank you very much. Did she run all the way here with a Death Stalker on her tail? I hear Blake say as the scorpion drew closer. Ah! Yang screamed angrily, fire exploding into existence around her. I can't take it anymore. Can everyone just chill out for like 2 seconds before something else happens? The group fell silent, save for Kung Fu Boy, who was joining the group. 1, 2, ding! Yang? Ruby asked, trying to get her sister's attention. She motioned upwards, and everyone's attention was drawn to the Nevermore that was circling the air. If I had to guess, the white speck that was clinging to its talon was probably Weiss. How could you leave me up here? I could hear faintly in the distance. Yep, that's Snowflake. I said jump, Ruby offered to nobody in particular. She's gonna fall, Blake added dryly. No, she won't, Ruby said in false reassurance. She's falling, Kung Fu Boy stated. Bye-bye, Snowflake, I added with a sarcastic wave. Weiss fell quickly towards the ground, flailing wildly and making no attempts to slow her descent. She made my crash landing almost seem graceful by comparison. Then, Jean flung himself out of the trees and led her in midair. For a second, they seemed to just hang there. I couldn't hear what he said, but I know for a fact he said something that would have made Mr. New Vegas want to slap him. Then, he seemed to realize they were still 30 feet in the air before they both plummeted towards the ground. John hit the ground first, with Weiss landing daintily on top of him, looking no worse for wear. How these two just survived a drop like that with no injury, I did not know, but would very much like to learn. My hero, Weiss grumbled sarcastically. My back, John grunted painfully. Now's your chance, Lady Killer, I say sarcastically. Give her a peck on the cheek. John tilted his head, looking at me. Really? He asked, with some degree of hope hidden in the pain. No, not really. Get over here. Before the two of them got up, however, the red scorpion, Deathstalker, whatever, let out a screeching noise. Next thing I knew, the Legionnaire was lying on the ground in a crumpled heap next to us. Great, the gang's all here, Yang said with, at least I think, feigned enthusiasm. Now we can all die together! Not if I can help it, Ruby said with a cocksure smile on her face. She let out what I think was supposed to be an intimidating roar. It sounded more like a mewling kitten, and charged towards the raging scorpion. Ruby, wait! Yang shouted. Ruby swung the red block of steel out from her back, and it transformed into that massive scythe. She pointed it behind her and fired off a shot, using that momentum to catapult herself at the scorpion, who then proceeded to knock her back about 15 feet with no effort. Don't worry, Ruby shouted back. Totally fine. Wow. Never thought I'd meet someone who was bad as lying as I was. Even worse, she's probably only, what, 14? The scorpion approached Ruby as she stumbled to her feet. She turned and fired around from her scythe. It sparked harmlessly off the beast's bony carapace. I looked to the sky briefly. The Nevermore was flying back towards us now. Part of me wasn't sure what to do, but watching Ruby fight reminded me of the first trip I took with Veronica. She charged straight in and started punching things that attacked us. I had to save her ass more than once that trip. I looked briefly at the rest of the would-be hunters present, still just standing there. They're all just shitty backup. I growled. I bolt for the temple, taking care not to accidentally discharge my rifle as I run. Ruby, despite clearly being outclassed, was still swinging her scythe, trying in vain attempt to hurt the beast. Unfortunately, the scorpion kept either knocking her back or taking pot shots at her with its stinger. She would be running away. Instead, she was just determined to stay and fight. I was about 20 yards away the next time she got knocked down. The scorpion wasted no time. It thrust its stinger at the downed girl. I leapt into Vats, and I needed to act. This thing's shell was too tough. Don't know if it had the strength varies for each of the creatures, but it shrugged off a 12.7 mm round. My rifle fires .308. I'm not punching a hole in it. I need to get creative. If the splatter from a 10 mm was enough to wound the eyes of a Yaogwai, this will hurt hell of a lot more. I aimed carefully in Vats. I needed only one shot to prove my point. I lined up the iron sights with the largest eye of the scorpion's right side. I squeezed the trigger and watched as the eye instantly exploded into a shower of blood and viscera. It worked too. The shock knocked the creature off target enough to miss Ruby entirely. She recovered and backpedaled towards me. I left Vats and handled things normally. I put another round into the scorpion's largest right eye. It staggered, clearly not happy with the sudden decrease in vision. Oh, okay, Ruby said, trying to regain her composure. We got this. No, we don't, I say, feeling the receiver of my rifle beginning to gum up. I thought I'd cleaned it before I got sucked into this world. Guess that was something I'd have to take care of if we survive this. I gripped one of the grenades on my chest and removed it. I pulled the pin and chucked it at the scorpion. It exploded, blowing off one of its smaller legs, but otherwise leaving it unharmed. I really screwed the pooch on weapons. I grabbed Ruby by her hood and began running back to the temple. The only reason I'd bothered coming out here was to grab her, not fight the barn-sized insect. She struggled as I pulled her. Hey! Let me go! We can take that thing! She shouted. Shut up! You're literally trying to get yourself killed. At that moment, the Nevermore had rejoined the party. I heard a screech as the bird hovered overhead. There was a high-pitched whistling and thudding behind me, and it was gaining. A torrent of humongous black feathers passed me, piercing into the ground. I was pulled to a stop when one of the feathers pierced Ruby's cape, pinning her in place. Ruby! Yang shouted, finally snapping her out of whatever trance kept everyone from moving. She charged towards us, but was stopped by another volley of feathers. I released Ruby's hood, and she immediately went to trying to free her cape from the feathers pinning it. I tried to rip the fabric, but it only stretched. I didn't have any clue what the cape was made of, but I wasn't going to rip it free, so I turned my attention to the feather. I pushed and pulled on it, trying to pry it from the ground. Ruby, get out of there! Yang shouted from the distance. I'm trying, she shouted back. Try harder, I shouted, striking against the feather. It wouldn't budge. The sounds of the scorpion's legs colliding with the ground stopped. It had reached us. I got a very good look at the eyes I'd blown out. It made an angry hiss, and quickly raising its tail. Though I was closer, it wasn't angling for me. It was angling for the target that couldn't run away. Ruby's eyes widened as the stinger shot towards her. I moved from the feather, putting myself between the stinger and Ruby. I wrapped my arms around her, closing my eyes and praying my arm was strong enough to stop Ruby from getting hurt. There was a rush of wind, an unsettling cracking noise. I braced myself for the pain to set in, but nothing came. "You are so childish," came my familiar snooty tone. I opened my eyes and released the girl. Turning back, I saw a wall of ice keeping the stinger less than an inch away from the pack had been. About 5 feet away, Weiss was knelt with her sword plunged into the dirt, the ice seeming to grow out from it. What the? How? And dim-witted, Weiss continued, turning to face Ruby, and hyperactive, and don't even get me started on your fighting style. How did you? I stammered, trying to comprehend the wall of ice. And I suppose I can be a bit, Weiss continued, ignoring my slow breakdown at the ice, difficult. But if we're going to do this, we're going to have to do it together. Ice wall? What? So if you quit trying to be a show off, I'll be nicer. I am not trying to show off, Ruby answered. I want you to know I can do this. Where the hell did all this ice come from? I shout, finally grabbing Weiss's attention. Oh, right, you. She got up in my face. What were you thinking? I finally dropped the subject of ice, knowing I wasn't going to get an answer for the time being. Me? I was thinking, gee, this little idiot's going to get herself killed. Maybe I should do something about that. You almost got yourself killed. Well, I still acted before she nearly got turned into a pincushion. Me too, Ruby squeaked as her sister squeezed her for a little longer. When she was finally released, she turned and looked at me. Thank you for, coming to help me, Six. Don't mention it, I say, fiddling the bolt of my rifle, trying to guess how many shots I could get before it starts jamming. If I waited on someone else to do it, they'd probably screw it up, I added sarcastically. Nice to know my sister's safety means so much to you, Yang said with a cocky smile. Hey, everyone gets one, I say, raising my hand innocently. Besides, it's not like anyone else is chomping at the bit to fight that thing. That's because no one else here was stupid enough to try, Weiss said. Hey, Ruby pouted. Gotta agree with Snowflake here, Ruby, I say with a shrug. That was pretty dumb, demonic calling when the Nevermore broke our conversation. I could see it preparing to circle back in the distance. We raced back to the temple as the bird began to turn. Guys, Jean shouted, that thing's coming back around. No kidding, I asked sarcastically. I thought it was going to leave us alone. What are we going to do? No sense in wasting time, Weiss cut in, motioning to the relics. Our objective's right here. I quickly flipped through my Pip-Boy just to double check. She's right. Our job was to collect these relics and return to the cliff, not waste time two-stepping with a couple of overgrown bugs and birds. There's no point in fighting, Ruby surmised. So run and live then? Damn Skippy! Yushan nodded happily in agreement. He and Ruby quickly went into the temple and grabbed a piece from the pedestal. The scorpion began to make hissing noises loud enough that we could hear it even from the distance we were at. I saw the ice beginning to shift and readied my compass to point us back to the cliffs. Time we left, Kung Fu Boy said. Right, Six? Ruby asked. I pointed to the direction of the woods. Got it. Ready? She gave me a nod. Good. All right, everybody. Keep close and don't fall behind. We're hauling ass out of here. Let's go! I slid my rifle back into its holster and ran from the temple. I charged up the hill. I didn't bother looking back. I trusted they were either going to follow or find their own way back. I passed through the boundary of trees and leapt over a log. The compass pointed dead ahead, and I was intent on following it. It was only after I rounded the bend that I noticed a red and bronze tint in the corner of my vision. A cursory glance revealed that the Legionnaire was keeping pace with me. Every step she took, she effortlessly duplicated. I might not want to shoot her anymore, but I wasn't about to be outdone by her either. I moved a little faster, and she kept up with me. Needless to say, this was getting a little annoying. Aight, that's how you want to play? Let's play. I took the lead and started running full speed. When it comes to agility, I'm a goddamn acrobatic marvel. I'm not about to be outdone by a Legionnaire wannabe. We burst from the forest and into the ruins at the base of the cliff. To my surprise, everyone managed to keep up well enough. We were also just ahead of the Nevermore. If we could climb the cliff, we'd be in the clear, technically speaking. Just a bit further, I shouted, aiming for the stone bridge in front of us. It's gaining on us, Jean shouted from his place behind me. We're almost there. You just gotta. I stopped dead in my tracks when I heard it. A low, bellowing note that always signaled I was about to have a very bad day. The others closed the distance behind me, either not hearing the noise or not recognizing it. They all came to a stop beside me, confused. Six, what's wrong? Ruby asked. We're about to have a very bad time, I say as calmly as I can, pulling my hunting rifle back out. We're about to have a very, very bad time. I slowly started backing away from the bridge, scanning the cliffside in front of me for the source of the noise. Look, the exit's right there, Jean said, trying to reassure either himself or everyone. We just gotta cross the bridge. He went to walk past me, and I grabbed him by the back of his armor, pulling him back into the crowd. He stumbled and landed on his butt. Hey, what was that for? Quiet! I hissed. The Nevermore's getting closer, Six, Ruby insisted. The bellow echoed again. They didn't seem to notice it again, but I heard it loud and clear. It was getting closer, and I still didn't know where it was coming from. The demonic cawing of the Nevermore was growing closer. We have to go, Weiss said, pushing past me. The rest of the group soon followed, but I remained frozen in my spot. The bellow sounded once more, and I finally realized where it was coming from. Stop! Don't go near the bridge! Too late. The circular stone anchor in front of the bridge burst open, a massive clawed hand punching through it and slamming against the ground, pulling an equally massive creature from beneath the stone. Its skin was black as pitch, though you'd never guess it due to being completely covered in plates of bone armor. It had a pair of horns that curved off either side of its head, bowing out to a point. Red lines traced its armor, flowing messily down its limbs and back alongside its massive tail. Its jaws was filled with razor-sharp teeth, all guarded by segments of bone that lined its jaw and rose to several points itself. Its eyes glowed bright, seeming to pierce through the hunters that stood before it. Powerful front legs carried it from its underground home, as though the armor that clad it weighed nothing. At its peak, it stood larger than any other of its kind I'd seen. This was the largest death claw I'd ever seen. Everyone took a step back as the beast let out a ferocious roar. I could feel the wind it made its rage clear. Everyone, get back! I shouted, ripping another of my grenades from my belt. I pulled the pin and lobbed it as hard as I could. It sailed over the small crowd and landed at the feet of the Deathclaw. The grenade exploded between its legs, and the monster roared. The grenade did nothing. Having failed to heed my admittedly late warning, the crowd was slow to react. The Deathclaw charged them, moving with its infamous speed and agility. With a swipe of its massive claws, Jean went flying. How he avoided just being shredded is beyond me. But he was sent into a pillar, a good distance from the bridge. Another swipe launched Weiss to my feet. Only then did the crowd react appropriately, trying to put distance between themselves and that rampaging monster, except for Yang and Nora, who proceeded to try and take the beast head on. What is that thing? Ruby asked, quickly following me as I tried to line up a shot. Haven't you ever faced a death claw before? I asked, loosing around at the aforementioned creature's legs. A what? Ruby didn't seem to understand, but did as she was told. She whipped out a rifle and started flinging around to the Deathclaw's legs. From their closer location, I watched as Yang and Nora did battle with the monster. Nora had taken a frickin' grenade launcher and was trying to blow the damn thing up. Yang, in what I can only assume is a bout of insanity, was trying to punch the thing into submission. Granted, it looked as though she was using some sort of ballistic fist, but the point still stands that this girl was trying to box the thing to death. But it wasn't working. Everything we sent at the Deathclaw just seemed to make it even madder. It was swinging and charging like a frenzied bull. It focused itself on Yang and charged her down, trapping her between its horns. It ran her back from the bridge and towards us. I rolled out of the way as it barreled past me and slammed Yang into the pillar. I could hear the stone works shift from the impact. I took another shot, aiming for the nape of the Deathclaw's neck. The bullet collided into another shower of sparks. What's the only thing worse than a Deathclaw? I thought bitterly. An armored one. The Deathclaw pulled back and rammed Yang again. Barely recovering in time, she dipped out of the way as the monster headbutted into the pillar again. Guys, Jean shouted, we got company! The demonic caw of the Nevermore echoed overhead as the massive bird raced past the ruins. I turned to the sound of splintering wood as the Deathstalker burst from the woods. Blake and Kung Fu Boy had taken to attacking the Scorpion, while Weiss and the Legion had taken the opportunity to collect themselves. Run! Legion shouted. I was in a position to agree with her. The inclusion of an armored clad Deathclaw officially made the situation untenable. Everyone who could began sprinting towards the bridge, myself included. The only ones who would stop were Kung Fu Boy and the Legion to lay down suppressing fire. For the little good that did. Yang! Ruby shouted. I turned my attention back towards the Yellow Huntress. Despite everyone else's trying to beat feet, she was going toe to toe with the Death Claw. She was starting to lose. It was pushing her back. She was handling herself well. Very few people could claim they beat a Deathclaw to death with their bare hands, but it was becoming increasingly clear that if she was going to be one of them, it wasn't going to be today. The Deathclaw was smacking her around and trying to give her no chance to escape. She was fighting admirably. I could actually see the armor on the Deathclaw's skin shuddering, but it was trying to back her into a corner. It was backing her towards the cliff. She didn't seem to realize it. She was too engrossed with just trying to avoid the hits it was sending at her. There were probably 10 feet from the edge when I moved. My feet pounded against the ground as I closed the distance between me and the huntress. I don't know what I was doing. My feet moved before I'd actually thought of a plan. What was I supposed to do? What could I do? 5 feet from the edge, the Deathclaw bent down and charged at Yang. The huntress cocked her arm back, fully intending to punch the Deathclaw in the head as it charged towards her. She never got the chance. I closed the distance remaining in a single bound and slammed into her with a shoulder check, tackling her out of the way. Run, you idiot! I shouted a moment before the Deathclaw collided with me. It felt like I was hit by a truck. I didn't know if the Deathclaw had planned to stop before going over the edge. If it did, then it screwed up that part of its plan royally. I grabbed it by the horns and braced as we both went flying over the edge of the cliff and into the mist below. I grappled the Deathclaw in midair. Even as we plummeted towards the ground, the thing was still trying to take a bite out of me. The wind roared in my ears as we tumbled helplessly through the air. I couldn't see the bottom of the ravine we were falling into, so I had no way of knowing when we were going to hit. All I could do was grapple with the beast and hope I wasn't the one to hit the ground first. The Deathclaw snapped its jaws at me, trying to tear out my chest. It crashed its arms against whatever part of me it could aim at. It wanted to make sure that if it was going to die, I would go before it. Not happening. I locked my legs around its neck and flipped myself onto its back. The beast flailed wildly as I planted myself there and grabbed it by the horns. I twisted and jerked its head, struggling to keep it beneath me as we fell. I punched it in its spine and it was momentarily stunned, just long enough for me to brace for impact. The ground came up out of nowhere, and we hit it hard. The Deathclaw cushioned my landing, but it still sent me sprawling. It had been worse than the landing in the forest not more than a few hours ago. It probably doesn't help we hit solid rock rather than dirt. My entire body felt like it had just been put through the ringer, and I just wanted to lie down and rest. My guess? I was back down to 15% again. Hadn't taken much, just another fall from a cliff. I swear, if I'm gonna just keep falling off shit, I'm gonna start avoiding high places. I forced myself to my feet and looked back at the Deathclaw. It lay down against the cold stone ground. Its tongue was out, and its mouth and eyes were shut. I knew better than to hope it was dead, though. I hobbled away from the monster. I dropped my rifle in the free fall. It smashed against the floor of the ravine. I found it a few feet from my landing spot. The barrel and mechanics looked functional, but the stock was completely shattered. I could probably chance at using it again, but there was no way I was making any precise shots with it until I got it fixed. I slid the shattered rifle back into my coat and turned my attention to above me. I could hear explosions and gunfire. Things probably weren't going to be any better for Ruby and her friends right now. The sounds of soft growling drew my attention back to the area around me. I was right. The Deathclaw wasn't dead. Its eyes snapped open and it bellowed again. It struggled to rise to its feet. Its hind legs stayed limp behind it. Looks like the fall did something, at least. I gritted my teeth and pulled out my 10mm pistol. The Deathclaw was crippled, but it was still alive, but that didn't mean I was safe. I was right, too. Unlike any other Deathclaw I'd seen, this one started to drag itself forward with its arms. It wasn't anywhere near as fast as when it could run, but it was no slouch. It bounded towards me, armor cracked and scraping against the stone. I strafed to the left, shooting at the cracks in its armor, hoping that if I kept hammering them, they'd break and I could actually kill the thing. But I could only run so fast while trying to aim. The beast got close and took a swipe that sent me sprawling back. I landed on my back, dazed with a ring in my ears. I tried to focus, lifting myself up enough to shoot at the Deathclaw as it continued its assault, but I couldn't aim. My bullets kept bouncing off its armor. I couldn't hit the cracks when the Deathclaw was bearing down on me, and I was seeing double. The Deathclaw lunged, and I rolled lamely to one side. It made another swipe for me, and I barely connected. I felt its claws rake across the front of my armor, and watched as the thin lines traced over one of those lenses of my gas mask. I staggered to my feet and took another shot before the slide locked back on my pistol. I'd emptied the clip. I pressed the release lever and snapped the clip out of my pistol, vigorously jamming in another as the Deathclaw prepared for another lunge. It stopped when the sound of breaking stone sounded from above us. The stone bridge collapsed above us. Its massive pieces rained down on us. I drove out of the way again, but I couldn't move fast enough. One of the massive stone supports fell on my left leg. I heard a very unsettling crunch and was racked with pain. I let out an agonized howl. That's broken. That's definitely broken. The Deathclaw continued to claw its way out of the rubble, shrugging off the several tons of bridge like it was nothing. Are you kidding me? Come on! I pushed myself up again and began to hobble as fast as my one leg could carry me, cursing every time my broken leg had any weight put on it. I could hear the Deathclaw closing in. I wasn't running away this time. I literally felt like I was about to die if the breeze hit me the wrong way, and the thing chasing me survived everything that was thrown at it. That armor stopped everything I threw at it. It shrugged off everything. If I wanted to live, I needed to get past it. But how? Every part of it was covered up tight, except for its mouth. An idea began to form in my head as I hobbled. I could hear the Deathclaw behind me, getting closer with each second. I was out of options, and this was a very bad plan. But it was do or die time. If I died, I'd at least known I was the only dumbass wastelander to try something this stupid. I pulled my last grenade from my belt and ripped out the pin. I clasped the safety lever down and turned to stare death in the face. It lunged at me without a second of hesitation. It knocked me down on my back and tore into my left shoulder. My armor was beginning to crumble underneath its teeth. I could feel a warm liquid trickling down my arm. Hey, asshole! I growled through gritted teeth. Before digging in, how about you try some finger food? I jammed my knee into the Deathclaw's throat, and it released my shoulder and rears back slightly, just enough for me to ram my left arm into its open mouth. I slithered my fist to the top of its throat and released my grenade. I whipped my arm back out and scrambled away from the dazed opponent. It only got a few feet away before the grenade goes off. I feel a shower of bone and flesh splatter against my back. I turned back over and stared down at my enemy, their jaw having been blown messily from their head in conjunction with a large section of their throat. Black blood oozed from the grievously fatal wound. I paused for a tense moment, as the creature remained frozen in place. It didn't fall or move to attack me again. It just stood rigidly on its arms. That wasn't good enough for me. I aimed my pistol and pumped the whole clip into its exposed throat. A shower of blood flowed out. The creature made a shuddering downward movement as my clip ran dry. But it still stood. Die already! I whipped out my utterly wrecked hunting rifle and jammed the barrel into its throat. I yanked the trigger and a .308 round burst through the back of its neck with a mess of blood and bone. The Deathclaw finally collapses. I lay back against the ground, gasping for air as the adrenaline in my blood begins to fade. Everything hurt, and I really just wanted to take a nap. Of course, that was before I had to dodge a giant decapitated bird corpse that was now falling into the ravine. Dodging the limp bird was easy enough. It was finding my way back out of the ravine that took longer. The place was misty, and it was hard hobbling around on the loose gravel with a broken leg. I eventually found an old carved stone staircase that worked its way up the side of the cliff. Assuming there had been a river here at some point, maybe the people that used to occupy this ruin used these stairs to reach it. My sun healing didn't kick in until I was about halfway up the cliff and out of the mist. By the time I reached the top of the stairs, my leg was still tender, but I could at least walk easily. My companions had all but disappeared. I could just barely make out the people standing at the top of the cliff where we'd been launched from at the start of this whole debacle. It took a few minutes to find the bridge to the other side that hadn't been completely wrecked. From there, I just followed the path that wound its way up the cliff. I came to a small forest to the left of where we'd been launched from. I found my companions by the cliffside, looking down at the ravine. Ozpin and Goodwitch were standing a few feet behind them, looking solemn. Never forget that this is the path you've chosen, I hear Ozpin saying as I approach. Hard as it may be, sacrifice is now part of your lives. I stumbled towards my companions by the cliffside, curious why they were all standing so close to the edge. As I came close enough, Ozpin and Goodwitch took a notice of me. They both looked like they'd seen a ghost when they locked eyes with my gas mask. I looked Goodwitch dead in the face from my distant standing. I don't care when it happens or how. One day, I will get my revenge on you for what you did today. I turned back to face my companions, still facing off the cliff, and joining them in the forlonging vigil into the abyss. So, did someone fall off? I asked, breaking the silence. 'Cause if we did, we should consider putting up some guardrails here or something. I turned to look at everyone for an answer and was met by wide eyes and slacked jaws. Everyone stared at me in surprise. Most of them had a look of incredulity. I noticed Nora had one of awe. 6? Ruby asked, stepping out of the crowd. Her eyes looked a little red and puffy. You're alive? Course I'm alive! I say in the best attempt to sound jovial. Don't need to act so surprised. But you went over the cliff with that thing. Thing? You mean the Deathclaw? Yes! Oh, don't worry. I took care of it. I tried to convey a smile through my helmet. Ruby blinked twice and looked me over, clearly surveying the damage I took. The claw marks across my chest and mask, the huge bite mark on my shoulder, my slightly messed up leg, and the huge blood stain that ran down the left of my sleeve. How? Nora asked excitedly from her position in the crowd. Ah, well, I rubbed the mark on my shoulder. I guess he bit off a little more than he could chew. Silence filled the air. I waited for my terrible joke to settle over everyone. I saw Yang snickering. It was growing into a pretty good laugh. Well, what about you guys? I asked, a smile over my face. We took care of it? Ruby motioned over to the decapitated head of the Nevermore. Damn! Looks like someone got a little ahead of themselves. I could tell everyone was slowly growing a little irked by my bad jokes, except Yang, who was still cackling with laughter. I looked back down the cliff to the ruins, taking notice of the scorpion with its stinger now embedded into its head. Gotta say, though, you guys sure did a number on that thing while I wasn't around. Yeah, Yang chuckled. It was a bit of a sting operation. She started howling at her own joke while everyone else just rolled their eyes. I chuckled a little. That's not funny. Things moved pretty quick after that. We were all led back to the academy and given a short period to clean ourselves up. By that time, most of my wounds had healed and was at least not going to kneel over if the wind blew over me. I took the chance to clean the blood, mud, and any other muck that got on me off. After that, I slid back into my park stroller outfit and got to work on patching my armor. My rifle was a wreck. I was going to need a bunch of resources in a few hours to fix it properly, so I saved that for later. For the time being, I knocked the dings out of my armor and kept it from coming undone. Once I did that, I sequestered myself someplace I wouldn't be bothered and removed my helmet. The damage was mostly superficial, nothing a bit of polish and elbow grease wouldn't take out. By the time I was finished, we were all called to an auditorium. All of the people who'd partnered up and formed teams were assembled towards the front of the room. I could make out the figures of Ruby, Weiss, Blake, and Yang from my position on the back wall. I doubted they could see me against the sea of silhouettes and darkness, but that was fine. I wasn't looking to call attention to myself anyways. Russell Thrush, Carden Winchester, Dove Bronzewing, and Sky Lark, Ozpin said from the front of the stage. With him were 4 young men of varying sizes. The 4 of you retrieve the Black Bishop piece. From this day forward, you will work together as Team Cardinal. The 4 boys' face appeared on a large overhead screen under the scope by the letters CDRL. Led by Carden Winchester, Ozpin finished. The 4 boys nodded and walked off stage as another set of 4 students took the stage. I recognized Jean, Legion, Nora, and the Kung Fu boy. Jean Arc, Li Ren, Pyra Norcus, and Nora Valkyrie. The 4 of you retrieved the White Rook piece. From this day forward, you shall work together as Team Juniper. Similar to the last group, their pictures appeared on screen underscored by the letters JNPR. Nora hooped on one leg and latched onto Kung Fu Boy, I guess I should call him Ren now, led by Jean Arc, Ozpin stated. A large smile flashed onto Pyra's face. Jean looked around confused. I would too. I wouldn't peg him for the leader type. Meh, I'll give it time, see how it turns out. Pyra playfully punched Jean in the arm and sent him sprawling to the floor. A sprinkle of laughter stretched across the auditorium. Probably won't take long. The newly formed team left the stage, and Ruby's small group took it. And finally, Blake Belladonna, Ruby Rose, Weiss Schnee, and Yang Xiao Long. Xiao Long? Sounded Chinese. Maybe the Chinese are still here somewhere. The 4 of you have retrieved the White Knight piece. From this day forward, you will work together as Team Ruby. I looked to the screen as the letters scrolled across them. RWBY. Huh, that's a little ironic. Led by Ruby Rose. Scratch that, that was completely deliberate. Ruby did her best to contain her shock and excitement while Weiss looked at her in shock. Yang ran right up to her younger sibling and wrapped her in a bear hug. Looks as though things are shaping up to be an interesting year. Ozpin finished with a smile. Goodwitch strode up to next to him and took the stage. This concludes today's ceremonies. Please return to your dorms and prepare for classes tomorrow. Classes will commence at 9 a.m. tomorrow. People began to file out of the auditorium. Most of them, newly formed teams, were busy conversing. I could see Nora bouncing around Ren like a cocked out bloatfly. Most of Team Ruby looked to be celebrating the way things turned out, which was good enough for me. After all, I did my bit and managed to dodge the bullets that got sent my way. Mr. Six, came a stern voice from beside me. I turned and saw Miss Goodwitch standing there. I must ask you to follow me for a moment. All right. I had an idea of what this was about and figured I should get it out of the way. Miss Goodwitch led me down a series of vacant hallways and up an elevator. We climbed in and rode it all the way to the top. We arrived at the top floor of the tower. The doors to the elevator slid open and revealed an office space that probably would have made Mr. House jealous. The place was immaculate, with columns of dark stone supporting the roof, tinted windows, dyeing the room a green with light of the setting sun, and cogs and gears of varying sizes whirling and clicking around the room like we were inside of a massive clock. Enjoying the scenery? Ozpin asked from his desk, having noticed how distracted I was. Gotta say, never seen anything quite like this in my travels, I say with a shrug. Oh, I'll take that as a compliment then. You best, but I doubt you'd brought me here to talk about home decorating. Indeed. Ozpin motioned us toward the seat in front of his desk. I went and took it. So, may I ask why you wanted to speak with me, or would you prefer to tell me? Whichever you prefer. Ozpin took a sip from his mug of coffee. Okay. Why am I here? I wanted to ask you a few questions about what happened during the initiation today. Is that all? Yes. Nothing too complicated, I assume. Not at all. I say, slightly surprised. I'd been expecting something else. Ask away. Very well. When you were attacked this afternoon from an unknown form of Grim, assaulted the other initiates. From what I've gathered, you seem to have some familiarity with it. Familiarity is relative. The thing looked like one of the creatures from my world. Oh? Ozpin looked intrigued by this. Yeah, but so did a few of others. Wait, what did you call them? Grim? Ah, yes. I forgot. You don't know much about this world. No kidding. Want to fill me in? No. I believe letting you discover this world on your own terms will help you grow accustomed to it. I wanted to reach across the desk and smack Ozpin. Grown accustomed? I was only sticking around here until I found a way home. I'm not making a home here. The sooner I get away from this crazy twin moon planet, the better. You were saying? Ozpin prompted me to continue. I sighed and continued. The Grim, as you put it, looks similar to a creature from my world, one known as a Deathclaw. That's certainly an ominous name, Ozpin chuckled. Nothing ominous about it. There's several hundred pounds of irradiated death in claws that can strip a person to the bone in a matter of seconds. Ozpin stared silently for a moment. That does sound deadly. No kidding, I asked sarcastically. So, you would say these creatures are feared where you're from? You're pulling my leg, right? What part of strip you to the bone in seconds isn't fear-inducing? Point taken. So, what's this about exactly? All this fear talk? Everything, Mr. Six. Ozpin rose from his seat and went to stare out the nearby window. The grim creatures are beings that are drawn to negative emotions. Hatred, jealousy, sadness, fear, I surmise for him. Indeed, they are drawn to it and will destroy any living creature they find. They are pure engines of destruction. This connects to me how? Until today, it has been hard to identify where the various forms of grin spawned from. Most of what we learned is speculative at best. But with your appearance in this world, a new Grim with a resemblance to a beast only people from your world are familiar with appears in the midst of initiation. One that very nearly killed you. So, you brought me here because you want to confirm a theory? Yes, a possible explanation for what brings the Grim into existence. You may very well help us in ways you are not anticipating. I nod thoughtfully at this. Maybe my presence could do some good if the world had problems an outsider could help with. Well, I put my hands on my knees and rise from a chair. Glad I could help. But if you don't mind, I have things I need to do. Such as do some shopping, get cleaned up, things of that nature. It helps that I don't have to spend all the time getting to know people. Oh, that's one way to give the cold shoulder to your teammates. I scoff as I headed towards the elevator. That implies I actually have any. Osmond chuckled. Tell me, Mr. Six, did you find it odd that I didn't call up any pawn teams? My pointer finger hovered over the call button for the elevator. I stopped and considered his words for a moment. I'd watched the ceremony from the beginning and didn't recall seeing any pawn teams despite the use of black and white pieces. Perhaps that's because there are no pawn teams, Goodwitch finished. Correct, Osmond continued. The relics you chose were added in addition to the pre-chosen PCs. I took a step back from the elevator and looked at the man staring out the window. You were planning on me not playing along? Indeed. Bullshit. Goodwitch shot me a glare for language. What would you have done if another team chose the pawns? Or if I partnered up with someone? If you'd partnered with someone, you'd go through the normal process, and the extra initiates would have been paired with some other students. As for if someone else chose the pawns, well, Osmond turned back and gave me a coy smile. I am the headmaster. Do you really think specific chess pieces would have derailed anything? Son of a bitch! Planned this shit. Damn it! So, I asked, not entirely sure where this left me. I didn't partner up with anyone, and last I checked, you can't force that. True, but that doesn't stop me from placing you on a team. And, as I noticed, you had a certain affinity for one team in particular. I got a sinking feeling in my gut. No, you wouldn't. I stood stiffly in the doorway of the dorm room, the four girls seated on their beds and staring at me as Miss Goodwitch stood beside me, explaining, due to a miscalculation, Mr. Styx was left without a team. While we work to remedy this, he has been made a secondary member of your team. As such, he's under the command and care of your team's leader. Please, no, I've suffered enough. You are to treat him as a comrade as he is to treat you. If there are no questions, I shall take my leave. Each of the girls responded from their own levels of enthusiasm, none of it vocal. Ruby's eyes went wide and stared, sparkling, while she got that big grin on her face. Weiss looked over, slightly pissed at my return, and just sort of scowled at me. Blake didn't really have a reaction. She just kind of kept up this cool look like it didn't bother her, but I noticed her both seeming to droop slightly. Yang Yang got this big smirk on her face and gave me a look I wasn't entirely comfortable with. Very well. I wish you all a good evening. Goodwitch nodded and began to walk away. I turned around to try to stop her before I noticed that smirk from initiation had returned to her face. She's enjoying this! That is enjoying my suffering! Before I could continue trying to escape, Ruby clamped onto my arm and pulled me into the room. Welcome to Team Ruby 6, she said with a big, saccharine smile. Graham helped me. That will be all for this part. Again, sorry for the late upload. If you haven't seen the before, I got sick partway through recording this, so I kind of had to take a bit of a break. But this was a long one. I'm just glad I got it done for in time for me to start recording the next one. I hope you all enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe. Just tell me how I'm doing. I hope everyone has a great day. Toodles.